Koi dunga le treja tarvada tamji kimbio koba tobi toyalia ngazuita jike samlu tone kom japje ane samlu juwa tajin dushine tarva tamji kimbio koba toku gore dini zada di tobala ane ngazu lam tenge kibishinye 제고 기위신 될라테네 아주게 디센데 퇴제 안쉐슈시 냠슬링고 고래제 나가주 그신 제자다 디네기 로마텔라 하나가주 쉐슈네 타바다 탐치 김벽고 원 토바지 비게다 로마 뇌도 루와스들 로마 생이데 된 바세야들라 니간스 고고래세네 로마텔리아 기주 숨치고 고래제 제자디네자 기주 숨디 내가스는 로수르네 바제 아니 남주기 안에 레이디 야도 랭이겐 넘버 체도가 아니 셰럽드여 바체 아니 아직 최 냠는지알이야 안 돈여기 dum바 여gen지 오도시는 고래서 가서 그생 디고를 마시 직슈어요.
Good evening. So wanting to attain a state of freedom from the sufferings of samsara, the state of liberation, to attain such a state comes about through transforming our mind through meditation based on knowledge. Therefore, one needs to rely on a spiritual teacher who can illuminate for us the paths that we need to cultivate within. So in this regard, last week we started to look at, we briefly did an overview of the three qualities of a student. The characteristics of the one who relies. So in the published book, it's in the middle of page 35.
띵이 되어 주변다 동하 안에 타다 봐야지 되네게 삼단하이로네 주보고 인자 당주 될이야 다 직주 쉬비가리야 로마리아 삼로단하 삼로로 시간에서 고고리 세지 디송고로다 삼로단하 되니 시에나 아니 약고 용거리 지난 되니 삼 되니 마사베나 아직 냠는 야고지 야게 야고줘야리야 안데스 고고리스 지난 되니 인자다 되니게 튕긴 야고 상바나 아니 냠는 제발이야 교고 이야기 좋고 그래. 진짜 삼로 되는지 고고래 세지셔서 로스로 내봐 초소말로 로스로 내봐 고고래 세다. 안지기 디제네 야고도 디제 야고 말에서 량이기 넘버 체투하다. 근데 지게 내내 돈이를 dum바 되네게 로전 지긴 되는 슈긴 냠는 지긴 세비 돈이 dum바 여바지 고고래 세다. 삼로디 되네게 삼로 되는지 고고래 세 숨으로 하다도
Page 39.
So in the published book, we're on at the middle page 35, but in the handouts, it's page 39.
Page 40.
Or maybe page 40. So last time we looked at a quotation from Aryadeva, and in there the three qualities of the student were mentioned, being impartial, intelligent, and interested. So these qualities are required in order for the student to have these are the inner qualities the student requires in order to transform their mind. So in dependence on relying on their teacher, the teacher will guide them into how to identify which minds are wholesome and therefore will lead to happiness, and which minds are unwholesome, those minds of non-virtue, and therefore lead to suffering. And moreover, the teacher will guide one in not just identifying these two classes, but how to cultivate wholesome minds, to strengthen them, to become habituated to them. So through relying on a teacher and following their guidance, one will rapidly spiritually develop. But to be able to rely effectively, the student requires these three qualities. So that of being impartial is being open-minded, a mind that is not biased. The second quality of intelligence, this is where one thinks for oneself, where one uses one's analysis and reasoning, not just merely accepting, but thinks for oneself. And then the third is, it's translated here as interested, but perhaps is better translated as enthusiastic. It's a stronger word, where one has enthusiasm for the topic. This is also required so that one can apply oneself. In fact, this word here as interested is commonly translated as striving for liberation. So one needs this third characteristic so that one applies oneself with vigor to the Dharma topics. Now, continuing in the text from where we concluded last week, so it's a little further down in the published book. It's on page 35. It's probably page 40 then in the handout. In this regard, impartial means without bias.
Mini yuvaina tipene odete sosugi chode so odete yagur esada jik chode de ko yabu imela samlugine mata de yabu mar es phasha din ngan choslo basiro da jesan sosugi jik chol ba shi u damjin je shenda chode le ba jik mari ba kyen ja samta de bena de choslo ba siguro iza lo choslo wa jesan choslo ba me ba ko gure es denigi cholong me ba ko gure esen.
So here we're starting to look at these three characteristics of a student, each one in more detail. So being impartial means to be without bias. And another way to think of this is being honest or straightforward. And the opposite of someone who is impartial is someone who is closed-minded. Someone who's closed-minded, so the fault of not being impartial is that, for example, they will not listen to what a particular person has to say. Their mind is closed. They don't believe that this particular person could have anything worthwhile to say to them. Or they are closed to particular topics or subjects and do not want to hear anything about them. So this would be the fault of being partial or being biased.
And you chose Lungas in the Masadi was as you were been Chunal Masa Chunal Lunga de Legurua, Chetan Chorchilpa, Lungas, Samlodi, Socio Samlodi, Chorchilpa Jete, and Chorchil some Madan, Chos Lungasigura, the Nala Dangan Bene Mini Anzuki Chike Garsori Mini get Damshe Chick or Shiki Bana. Da sosugi chigli sosugi gawi chodil ba samna je de kweshe de be demba re da sa je demba tenya ji phasho she di ko she di le donal gune samma da de ko she di demba mar se ba ne ko lo nyommo bi ge nyommo be cho so da cha ro da de ma ju ge nyommo be cho so lu wa se di lu se di ga lu se nyommo be cho cha di ge 지사 소소기 가세데 착박이 초를 신제 아니 잔다데 말에서 파죠. 지사 동의 예수 군이 제데 의인 예수 정부라서 파줘들에 삼다 수주들에 삼다 년제 아니 가리네 직딩원에 덴바등원에 거기지 기 덴바르죠. 경화도 노트relab나 디초스로와 차고 말아. 그래서네 공의 예수의 심주제 제바제제 파제바제네 아니 경화도 디샤 경화도 노트relab나 초스노와 차기와 막아서는 그 장무 장샤기 돈에 너를 제바제 두치는 차기로 지상 초스노와 초지기 결혼 덴바레 라바 잠기 아니 초스노와 차기와 말다 초스노와세도 소수기 비니 초지를 소수기 가 직차체 소수기 차비 돈에 안델라데 야보레 결혼도 디바레서 하다 아니 파쇼딜에 또스 마가베 여버진 결혼도 디어 말해서 제베나 다 초스노와서 로 초스노와세디 되는시라고 얼마도 아직 먼저 초지를 결혼 덴바레서 해야지 결혼 덴바 말을랍네 이미지 초스노와 차야 말와 제가 초스노와스네 차비 원기 소수기 초델이야 배직 야보레서 하다 직딜에 소소 마가베 초지네 그 결혼 디야 말을랍네 다 초스노와세지 로 묘모비 초질 봐줘야죠. nyomoba chokso lungse bene jaladi chuna lungse de lungya de jaladrowa lungsa de chudrowa 제가 다들 아주 초소 룽시도 아주 삼로티 가와 룽고레스네 차당의 초로 송와 차 룽서디 가와 차당제 차상의 초를 두고 얼다 저어들 룽와시고 당한테 제가 소수의 삼로티 차당의 초로 줘와 있나 되네 초소 룽와시고다 초소 룽와세 되네 고고래
The text says, in this regard, impartial means without bias. This particular Tibetan word for bias literally means to fall to a particular side or fall to one side. So this really is an expression of being closed-minded, where one falls to one side rather than being open-minded, listening to what is said and thinking for oneself. But instead, one's mind is closed. So when one falls to one side or is biased, the side one falls to is the side of attachment. So this mind of bias is, it takes one to the afflictions in that it is a mind that where one falls to the side of the affliction of attachment, in that where someone that one is partial towards or biased towards, one will like them, have an attachment for them or for their views. And then one will listen to what they say, maybe without even thinking, accept what they say because they're on the same team as you, so to speak. Likewise, when one is biased and has fallen to a particular side, has a particular stream of attachment, those who are on the other side, one is closed towards. And anything they say, one readily rejects. One will not listen, give them a fair hearing. One will not see if there's something relevant, something to be learned. So here we see the fault of the biased mind in action. Rather than that, one needs to be aware of a tendency to be drawn towards those either those people or those who say things that one generally accepts or supports, who hold similar views. Be aware of the tendency of attachment to be drawn to that and readily accept what is in accordance with our own bias. And rather, we need to listen in an impartial manner with an open mind.
나도 심데 녀모비 초를 좋아하세요. 그거. 이 초서 녀모비 초를 봐 줘셔래. 좋아들 초서 좋아하세요. 그거. 제가 초서에 내가 그랬으면 녀모비 초지. 딜파 초를 좋아들 녀모비 초를 좋아. 제가 답변에 소수기야 직 유틸라 차비게 차과게도 디랑 초라 차과래도 디 초서 손에 랑게 심데 디 초서제 디 덴바레 야고레 경험서도 야고 말해서 리그로 변하도 디 연구를 받다가 저기 지나 제모르 답변에 소소 삼나려 소수기 지 제모제 초를 뜻 가와다 차과지 가정에는 니 초를 받되 삼나다 톰나선 삼나다 연구로 봐 근데 안디나시 나도 처리네 소수기 제 초를 봐 차비게 차네 아니 난주 시에 최대 댐지냐 냠내지래 약보래 한 결혼적이디 시에도 다다 말해서 제베는 더 초스러운 와서 녀모부 초스러운 와서 그걸 근데 초스러운 와는 로수르네바디 수르네바 용고 막 장부차고 말하다 수르네바는 장부체 니가게 돈 빼네 먼저 최쇼 거 직시에는 니게 거는 파 지금 랑이 초를 삼다에 가는 거지 지지타래서 소한 파쪽에 소야에 가는 거지 송구도 김천 가를 때 송구도 삼 심주지 제바 제제 누신 제바 제바는 장부 장셔야 되는 제바 지고로 받아 직초 맞아 지나 장부 장셔 제바 제제는 한 담에 타줄이야 한 지기 yani paydi disamlı dine çizine sunduwa jigdi dine tonde redowa gyumzen dine redowa sempeki nesuda hagoya yongora dinde 장보 차고 제대로 술을 내 봐서죠 로 장보 치고 그래 지난때 소속이 녀모배 쳐서 소속이 쳐는 작바에 먹는 송바에는 장보 차기 말에 파져들라 마가와지 차송바에 장보 차기 말에 지난 술을 내 봐 차기 말에 지난 로 술을 내 봐시고 그래 세도 녀모배기 차단거 쳐서 마송하고 그래서 그러다
This word for being partial means to be, or sorry, the word for being biased. This means to have fallen to a particular side. Or another way to express that, one has fallen to the side of attachment. So one has fallen from having an open mind. One has fallen, the open mind, which is an impartial mind, one has fallen to the side of attachment. And this is something that we have a great tendency towards, a tendency of being drawn towards what we like. For example, if one is watching a sports match and one's own team, the team you support, if they do a particular maneuver, joy arises. If the opposing team does that same skillful maneuver, the same joy does not arise. Because one's mind is biased, is partial. So too, when engaging in hearing or interacting with others, those who are of our same group, perhaps our same religion, or share our same general views, we immediately open and trusting towards them in a way we are not to groups or those to whom we have a bias towards. And the first word there, that of being impartial, so this literally means, the bias, this is the one that's fallen to a side, whereas the word for impartial means to be sort of on the side. So if one is partial as opposed to impartial, one is on the side, as opposed to being straightforward. And this is how we should, as students, engage with the teachings, with a straightforward attitude or an honest attitude. In other words, one's mind should be open, not drawn to the side, which is the word for being partial, or being biased, having fallen to one side.
Nadi loma delia lo choso longa debena da sosogi ji ode choge lama ro jine design de chui shanda lama ji yabo da ji be nyamle be yabo shu ji ma so ben da di pa design she shu wo ma nga zu di gi ora sem be ge dine sam da ben choso longa se che ro ji ze dine za ko soso rang la ya an ji nyamle gi ba de ya ge to tu ma ji za choso ma longa ji ko re se de sosogi lo di da pa 차단기 원도 마송아 주고 초라 마송아 주고 그래서 지난디네에서 로 정부제 안디바지 정부자제 안디바 제발에 지난 즉 소수기 데니글 롭장 치알이야 로 정부 주고 그래서 사실 송거다 초소 말로 주고 그래서 디김전로지 대변의 최로 쉬어야 나당 주 소수기 제라마시 샤라지 변의 소수기 라마스나스 소소리아지 랍캔로 최로 시게 지어지 디 아니 샤라싱이 매바이나 소소싱 오다코 신고를 빼야 오어서 바지 미션다 아니 주시션 빼 캐바다 냠냐 야보지 지 디자이어다디 샤라요 말은 안저디 이야기를 또다시 지시는 어디 초술롱아 제거디 디네자도 소소리아 디네 연대 이야기 저 갖고 지거와 지나디 마시 소수게 야가 잘 자야디 고갑지라고 말을 지자 디네 숨나 인지게 소술이야 로ጆ이 로 냠네 이야기 좋아라 소술을 바치 지거와 지네자 초소 말롱아지 고그래서 지송을다 기침으로 자기도 어디서
In our spiritual context, the way that bias or being partial may play itself out is if there is a particular teacher that one has a good connection with, this may well be mixed with attachment. And this attachment then we would view the teacher as being, where one would feel, would would have a partial attitude towards all others, because one sees oneself as a student of this teacher, close to this teacher, and therefore pushes others aside or even looks down on others. And this means when one has the opportunity to hear teachings from others, one's mind will not be open and receptive, but it will in fact be critical. Moreover, if one has a relationship with a particular teacher who may have some skills, but there is another teacher that one has access to who may have skills in other areas, in areas where you could benefit from, but because of a biased approach, you won't listen to what they have to say. You won't approach what they have to say with an open attitude. You may even not attend teachings. So in this way, we see how attachment serves to hinder our spiritual development, closing us off from those who could benefit us. So therefore, this is an important quality to develop as a student. Paragraph continues. If you have a bias, it will obscure your perception. You will not perceive excellent qualities, and therefore you will fail to find the meaning of excellent explanations.
And this one, the Karayo Junior, the deepness, and the Digi Pakajene, and Yundian Butonwe, Shengi, the Yundian Tumares, the Carson Digi, Gadiva, has been a gypsy. Once when it chick the view of an doing the project, Shandachi to Chalaj Martin, the deep shadow, Dimney, Pagi the tips and Pagasa, then Toyo Marwa. Pinichala Tagune, the Nemictum Dusin Chala Shandachi Kashavin, Pagi Toyo Marwa, or Dinashi, Sosugi, Mishandagi, Yende, Yawodan, and Jig, Diniki Yuvina, the Sosugi, Chatangi want to Soban, Chatandigi, Deepchene, Cholongdi, Pakachene, Shengi Yendin, the Tungmares, the Yena, the Tibne, Yenden Muton, Yenden Tungmares.
So if you are biased, it will obscure your perception. It will be this mind of bias will act as a veil, obscuring your mind from hearing the good qualities in the teaching that is being expressed, or obscure your mind from seeing good qualities in the teacher. And it continues, you will not perceive excellent qualities. And therefore, you'll fail to find the meaning of excellent explanations. Because one is also likely to not, in addition to not seeing the good qualities in those that one is biased towards, but one will be actively looking for faults, trying to find illustrations, things that one can interpret to reinforce one's bias.
Denigeda Yunde Tungmaris, Matondo and Garayorsene, Lepra Shepi doing mini Sedueda, me Lama Digi, and Zingan to Dunga to be Tablan and Digi to be Tablam, Lam Yamli Rimba, Manova, Macho, Yakochi, Shev Sumba in air, the Nishepi Dundadi, and then Susuga how to Maris, how Gumaris, Mini Sida, how Gumaris or that, how Gumaris, how Gumaris in Yingo Marvada, she's in a chair of Shumar machine, and how Guayamar, she's an Kisi Diesel Shubine, Yundem Mother Gunya, other DCG, Gunya, Tashavana, the Yundem Humar, she's at Dineza, and the Labra Shepi, and the La Sustunga Sevi, Tablamda, Digi to be a Tablam, Mano, Matuba, Yahuchi Sumba in air. Somebody so how to mares, doing mares, many days.
And as the sentence concludes with, and therefore you will fail to find the meaning of excellent explanations. Due to this veil that the mind of bias covers the mind with, despite hearing or being in the presence of an excellent teaching that is presented, a clear and unmistaken teaching, because of the mind being critical, looking for fault, being close to good qualities, one will actually not even hear this correct explanation as such. Rather, one will be, instead of listening with an open mind, one will be looking for faults, perhaps faults in particular forms of expression or mannerisms and so forth, things that are purely subjective and unimportant. This is what will follow from a mind of bias.
Dine zada di choso losuro neba se donda tishe. Dine di donda jibare nyuta umanyingbo nala ane akar sombara sene umanyingbo les choso longwe sem dungwe shiwan namya domen gyur she somba daros.
The text continues. It is just as Bhava Viveka says in his Essence of the Middle Way. While the mind is tormented by bias, one will never realize peace.
파죠 소수게 랑초라 차바다 현초라 다와인자 셈 동화세 셈 마기바스로 다 동화세 가서 현다디길이야 지게 셈 마가베 삼로 주여바자 지 소수게 가위 소수이 차베게 삼로 여바자 딘이 숙천부 여바자 딘이게 셈 동화세 셈 장보메바 마기바르 지금 거와 딘에자 소수게 셈 시와 남에면 심 시월 흘려요 말에서 지 초질선 흘려요 말에 디네자 메디에는 시와 메바자 남야 된다디 또도 말에 된다다 하고도 말에서 남야 또 미교를 써야 돼. 니가 어디?
Whilst listening to a Dharma teaching with a mind of bias, one's mind will be tormented by the bias. In other words, because for whatever reason, either the subject matter or the teacher is not in accordance with your wishes, not in accordance with your attachments, your bias, your mind is tormented. It's tormented by, for example, criticizing, looking for faults. And as we see then in the second line, one will never realize peace. So instead of being able to bath in the joy and beauty of the Dharma, one is rather suffering in the torment of bias.
Denege sem chosulongwa se di chosulongwa zila ji longse chos longse nyomo badele mangwe ngurwa bene dechagi chosulongwa da ane ji dawa chinju lo be chosulongwa dine yungurwa bene le sosugi jike chole ba chajine an bene 동반이 세디 템바디게네 지 노트레 세시 데네게 요마레 세시 람사디네 삼다샤베나 지 바가샤딘 제바크로 징마르바 지산 롭정으로 징마레 디마제베네 데네게 안 동반이 또 별로 또 두고말 동반이 또 두고말 또 마두베나 코베 동알로 주비 조와 시와 탈바세 톡톡 말에 시와나면 시와나면 또 미규세 데네 밤 어느 공부전나 대쇼로 초소 홍외게 셈도외 시와나면 또 미규세데 제가 데네게 고 당봉아저 롭정 지뒤급이야 당보 안에 지게 셈데 바 정불로 수르네베 토네 안에 지도 신의 심주제 제바제도 냠내 진조고마도 소소노와네 소소게 초소로 안지디 야버디 야버디 빠데 노주레사 제바코나 삼코나 균에마다만 디네스 된다 또도 말와서 그러다 된다 디네
A key expression of bias is in the context of one's views, having attachment to particular opinions, particular thoughts, particular views. So let's bring it to our Dharma context then. So if there is a teaching that is being presented on emptiness, and one has a biased view, believing phenomena are not empty of inherent existence, I do not want to hear anything about this nonsense, one probably will not even attend the teaching. Or if one is attending the teaching, then that topic is presented, one's mind will close and one will not listen. One may hear words, but one will not be engaging with the meaning, and therefore one will not be able to realize emptiness and attain peace. Rather, one should approach teachings with an impartial attitude, with a mind that is open and curious and listening, thinking, applying, thinking about what is being said, and where it makes sense, later applying it again and again in the way that one has been trained. That is the correct approach. That is the impartial approach.
Cholung choso lungwa sedi chol dona khare sedi de jermshi sungor da cholung sedi gare dona khare la ne cholung ni rangi lula chapa dangs shenyu lula dawa wo so jisan da cholung ni rangi lula chapa dang shenyu lula dawa wo.
And the text continues. To be biased means to be attached to one's own approach and averse to others' approaches.
Zanda choso lungwa se rangi lula chapa se de sosugi ludi pe yakore se de sosugi de chane gumze tonga jeba je rangi ludi da mano da lamnyamling rimba ru che luk se da anzo lamnyamling rimba ru che shebaina da rangi lula nyamlam gi rimba che da de mano da maro ta ta chi re de bene da ko ne digorwa Denigi Yaguma Sosugi Nisu Yagumashin Bene Sosugi the Chabi Wanga Sosu Chodlia Chabi Wangi Anganzu the Yagur Essada and the Jengulu Diliba Shimju Koromaje Tata Dumi Shimju Koromaja Konzo the Yaguma Essela Shabana Tisho Rangulula Chabada Shenyu Chola Tanwa Sechegurua.
To be biased means to be attached to one's own approach and averse to others' approaches. So this is a very clear illustration of someone who is close-minded. So here, where this would be experienced, is let's say one has some Dharma knowledge, and now one hears a teaching that is perhaps different to one's understanding, and immediately one's mind closes. This is not a skillful approach, because the mistake may not be in the presentation, but may be in one's own understanding. And the only way to know that for sure is to think, to listen and to think, to investigate. This is what needs to happen. But someone whose mind is closed, who is biased, they'll hear something that's different from their own understanding, different from what they recall hearing before, and they immediately will reject that and point to the faults in the presentation, which may or may not be where the fault lies.
Rangi Minangaji Yelubaru Chinda, like Yelubike, Lam Yamli Rimba Yaku, Shinganzo did that, Kucharaji Umara, because I've been Regulubi Lugi, Lam Yamli Rimba, Yamlin Jeda Rimba to Yapu, Chishimbaina, and then Shangi Yamlin Jeda Angana Sungu to Betine, Dane, and the Juktus. Charaji Umara, the machine by Sharam Tata, machine by Che, then machine by Che, Sosuri Ludi, I think under the Yapo Shango, and under the Chana, Rangulu, Yapo Charge, Chawaki, T. Chawaki, and under Ludi Bear, said that they didn't make it to treat the Yapomar as a chef, and they didn't know to reason. There's not Lam Yamli Rimba Pasha de Dusina, Shimju Che, Susugi, Yamli Rimba, Sosolobjon Che, or the Kitchen, says that Dineza, Sosugi. Lobjo Yago Shinwaina and Cho Gangi Tone and me Lamyam Limba Dentata, Nisu the Dinita Hako, says that Dineta, Sosugi Tambo Horonia, Sosugi the Kago, Sosugi, Chogi, Lamyam Limba de Yago Mashinwache, and Susan to the Yakure, said Mijandagi, and the Yamling Rimba de Mashin, Kodu Yakmare, Jin and Jigio Madelabna, did not really has order than that is order.
Let's take a very real example, because where this can be experiences either between religions or within the varying traditions within a religion. So let's take someone who knows the Geluk presentation on the stages of the path very well. when they hear a presentation of another tradition, say of the Nyingma tradition, they will hear the Nyingma presentation in a way that's very different from someone else who only partially knows the Geluk presentation, but is biased to the Geluk presentation. And then here they would hear that same presentation on the Nyingma, from the Nyingma tradition, and they would have their bias will arise, their attachment to their own side, their own view, their own group will arise, and they will criticize the one and praise the other. Whereas that first person, the one who knows the Geluk presentation well, through now hearing the presentation, for example, of the Nyingma tradition, they will recognize that there is, the difference is really largely in presentation and emphasis rather than in substance. So they will be able to engage with this new knowledge through having an open mind. Whereas that second person, through being closed-minded, through being biased, their afflictions will arise, their attachment to their views, their system, their approach. And this, therefore, is an arisal of afflictions. The meaning then is that we need to be honest or straightforward, not guided by our attachment, our bias, because to the extent that we are, we will not see the qualities in others as in individuals or as in other traditions. So this word translated here as approach is also the word for tradition or method.
And now the chosen who said the condition and Rangulu de la Chapache, Yapore, se charge, and Shen that Danwasin, Yavan, some of the Nishuvan, Lo chosen who is order, Lo Suruneva, Jangwood Shago Mares order.
So therefore the meaning of being impartial is that one is open-minded. The meaning of being partial is that one is attached to one's own side, one's own method, one's own approach.
And the
paragraph concludes, on discovering something like this in your own mind, you should discard it.
On the Nigidan, Dusin Dejawa de Sidim, Shenye Rangulula Chapada, Shenyulula, Dawi, Samlochik, Dusin Rangula, the next Samla Dui Menu said to Chebache, the Nigit Ayuba Hagosona, the Samla Dorgo Mevasokores, Mevasokores, or that, the Nigi Mevasokores, the Nigida. Denigi Cholo Rangula Chaba, the Genula, Davi, Chaba, Meba, Los Runeva, Giovanna, Susa Yuba Hawson, or the Yaboreshas and Susa Kawakumyada. Now, Dusine, it is for them.
It's our responsibility then to check for bias within, and something that, of course, through here in the teaching you'll be doing now, but one should continue through mindfulness to be aware of its potential arisal and eradicate it when it does. And when it's not there, when you notice that generally you do proceed without bias, rejoice in this.
Chokam Yamnas, Zurne Yang, Lashe La Yanda Pada, Nyeshe La, Nikaso, Surne Yang, Lashe Lam Yanda Dang, Nyeshe Lam Tana Ni, and JB Lo Tu Mena, and Nudu Mirues. Then Malosha, Deni Yang, and all the Antipartisan Judo.
The text continues. Is that in itself sufficient? If someone does not have the intelligence to differentiate good ways of explaining from faulty ways of explaining. When they seem the same, he is not a suitable vessel, even though impartial.
Desam yu chokam lam nyam na si da lo suru nepa chi lo changpo changsha chosu mal hongwa di an yu na digi ribe se ne an di zam yu digi ma res an di ka la kar kora se ne an di ka la ya an lo suru nepa chokam nyam na suru ne kya le she lam ya da pa ta nye she lam ta na ni la ni jewe lo tu me pa chi ne na ne ri mi ro se di da ga je le lo changpo changsha chi lo suru nepa chi digi ribe se di zam yu digi ma res ya meni ya chue xie di xie di kabla yakbu xeba na yakbu dang di yakbu ma xeba no chu xeba na di yakbu menba di yakbu mindu sibe yawa che tuba chi koguri es yawa che xingwa koguri di yawa che ma tuba ina diya dang ta chagi ma re es warda jizna dini ki yawa che tuba lo tu nyuba yu kanchi lo tu me na se di lo dini ki lo di nyuba me na dini che tuba ki lo ji me na ane dang ta chagi ma re es jizna dini ki yakbu no mano ma chu ba she ba de da an ji no chu she ba de ji ya me ba she ba de gi di o ji ya wa che tu ba ku gu re se wo re.
Is that in itself sufficient? So is impartiality alone sufficient? Well, it's only one of the three characteristics that a fully qualified student requires. So here, Tsongkhapa introduces the second, that of intelligence. So intelligence, then, is where a student is hearing the teaching and thinking for themselves, investigating, analyzing, not merely accepting what is being said, but thinking for themselves, so that they can, as the text says differentiate good ways of explaining from faulty ways of explaining.
Nanzuki diniki loma delia dambo nanzu loma delia ane chiki lamigi lam nyamli rimbadi yakbo sheba na odi yakbo sheso sambada chichi lam nyamli rimbadi ki pa nortru da mati barishe na odi chik mindu norson sambige samlodi di lenye yawa di chetuye di dambo ne kale kagbo rwa dine chetu gyunda chik kalgan samro chi sosugi nyamnyo le diwa chagirwa chisa dine inza da lenye namba che tuk matu se di kala khapo redwa dine zadi dina tatara chakminu sambige samlo yonsi girwa dangzuna ta lengi kasa lam yang daba sheba de odi tiksha sada lam yang daba no chu ji sheba na di tingminu sambige yawa chetu bana ane di ane lamige che yawa shungdu shigdu shigmin sambige samlo dingzu lamsa di hawo tuye kala khapo chagirwas dine zadi lengi number chewa sedi The
question may well come here is, how does this apply for a new student or someone who's new to a particular topic, not necessarily a new student, but new to a topic, in that the only way to judge whether a presentation is factually accurate or not is to have knowledge. And if this topic is new or relatively new to one, it's difficult to judge whether a topic is being well presented. So therefore, one may wonder, how can a new student have this characteristic of intelligence?
Dine zada yang da pa lever sheba seda ane jige lam dana jige dada no ru sheba seda ni de da dine ya disulia jige charara mangbu yongruwa 가시에 베네 야치도 베네 람냠랭이다 다음에 바다 아니 지게 곰나고 거마 다음에 고 셰드 따다 야고 셰바체 야제 다음에 바디 지게 셰타 만노네 셰베나 어디 지금미는 선배기다 고 갈라간상 롭종 지간 주인데 어디 송나 지더스 데네 따다 참어 선배 야와체 두에 용구로와 이 두고 냠는 심바로 식 갈간삼라 지게 신한 주인데 아직 데네게 냠레 림바 마 띵사바 되게 시대 갈라 야고 셰베네 디리샤사 아직 또 마디번 너 지금 멤버로신 어디 다 말했으면 비기 여와 제투구로와
What actually may be more likely is that when one hears an explanation, that the explanation on that particular topic can be presented usually in many different ways, in particular from the perspective of degrees of subtlety. So if one, for example, is being guided in how to meditate on selflessness, for example, that meditation can be presented in varying degrees of subtlety. So if one is not, doesn't have much knowledge, then one may well end up criticizing a good presentation, thinking it's a faulty presentation, but not realizing that it's just a degree of subtlety beyond one's own knowledge.
Laksa namda kom tene chanchu sem duschine gongure te nyamne rimba duschche gore sedi khonzugi shingor wada jizada ngedin ma shidu kablia da khonzugi thaba chimbi chu nyamne chebalya chik nabo nchike chanchu sem kom tene chanchu sem yakko ju kom je tene ba semje thamjela dungada dana nyambige ninje kom tene semje thamje dewa dembe tigi kasa oden jamba kom je dusch nyamne je gore sende shebaina 당에 당보 장수심 제고를 냠는 제고 되는 인제 냠는 되는 가서래 잡아 공부를 해서 셰로 하다 제나도 경험을 어디다 다다리 마서 딩기로 와 하고 두로 하네.
So for example, if I were to give a presentation on how to meditate on bodhicitta, and I talk about the need to meditate on compassion, wishing all beings be freed of suffering, and then to meditate on love, that all beings abide in happiness, and I'll leave the presentation on that, you'll know that's faulty. That there are other steps missing. For example, the subsequent meditation to develop the altruistic attitude of universal responsibility and the meditation of bodhicitta itself, those steps were omitted. So you'd recognize those errors or those omissions.
대화대 되는 배 잠바 공부를 되는 심장도 동안다 되는 배 니지고 되는 심장 담제 대화다 담바 동안 자와다 니 지기 심비게 하산남다 곰 되는 장주심 도시는 공부를 되는 셰베나 아니 경험을 가슴도 어디 레 선배지 삼로 리기로 와 제자디 경험주기디 경험주기 시연주 여반자 디기 아니 지 장보를 제나 어디 레 선바다 지금 마디 버스는 어디 따다리 마선비게 디 제투가 시도 어디 레 제자 양다바 셰바다 레 양다바 레버 셰바다 람다나 냠네지 로바 다나 셰바니디 노네 셰바니디 여와치 투 여와치 고그레스데 제자 데니게 투메나 데네 아니 가서 냠나 따라데 투 말하지 데도 말해 데네 투 여와치 고그레스데 데니기 경험적이 여와치 되도 지 체투도 다디 람냠레 림바 냠는 제발라 누고 마루와 제자디 따다 조투고 제자 데니시 체투고레 세 데니시 고그레 세 송고로와 베로시가도 셰베네.
So that illustration, you would have been using your intelligence, which would have recognized that there were steps in the meditation that were missing. Likewise, if I were to present the same meditation, but include all the steps, if you're meditating on compassion, and then love, and then the altruistic attitude, and then bodhicitta, so going through the correct sequence, you, through using your intelligence, will know that that is the correct sequence. And you can do so because of a basis of knowledge. And thereby, with the basis of knowledge, you can utilize your intelligence and recognize that that first explanation was faulty because all the steps of the meditation weren't there, some had been omitted. But the second presentation, the steps were complete.
다디엔 경험적에 삼다다 어디 직지마서 섬그로와 가사 라디오 TV 제수주바 산조고바 도발라 동마기 도벨로 고문 산제 뉴마바 지와 방으로와 가사 라디오 TV 제수주바세제 동바스네 가사 다음에 라바데로와 제가 디곰발레 된 산조고바 도투에 메로와 제가다 디지등이 시되든 마 잠니지고 잠바곰 되네 니지곰 되네 라산난다고 자주샘곰 Tene Pajun to Yamnjin, Dine Kansa, Ranja to be Sisu to be a dime, top load of comba, Gomgore, Dene San Yokoban, top 2 grace, Tabana, the council Carson was Janda did a manche, Drison, Kansa Ranja to be Sisu to be time about the combat, then San Yokoban, top 2 grace, Tita Rama, Samurova. And the day, Yanchik Denigi Yamna Rimbashan, Tomba to be Logomba and Kogure said, and did Atare, some Digi Yawa Chetu, Digasan, Dus Galansam, Lobjon Jedu, Yawa Chetu, the Chagudu.
Likewise, if in my presentation I were to continue and to say now, having meditated on bodhicitta, in order to become a Buddha and fulfill this determination to become a Buddha for the sake of others, one needs to meditate on the self-sufficient, substantially existent self, realizing that such a self does not exist. If you hear that, you immediately, based on your knowledge and using your intelligence, will recognize there's a mistake in that presentation. Because you know from your own knowledge that in addition to meditating on bodhicitta, in order to attain enlightenment, one needs to meditate on emptiness, not the core selflessness, which is the lack of a self-sufficient, substantially existent self. So thereby, based on knowledge and using your intelligence, you'll be able to differentiate between a correct presentation and a flawed presentation.
Dene to the Demba in a Kugure Sachi. Denegi Yawa Chetu Mena, Ne Dambo Janju Sem Gomia, the Ninjo Komgur Lamna, Din Dene or Dara Rea Sampe Samno Tanshavena, Janju Sem Gom Ninjo Gom Sedi, Tatachi Ligo Marwa, Chesan Denegi. And then on the Deji Dushine, Leki number Chava said, Dösia, Tor, that Rabor, Lea Dambo, which Chiclea some Tashavena, Yanchigi. Lianyi Yakushe da anything Yapma Shiva Yawa Cheto Kuri Lavida, Penanga Zugida, Lomal Machushida, Lamalia Cho Pugores, the Chevo Pugure, the Consolia Bayabures, and Pugore in Eda Sosoralia, which you Pueg, Nubada, Gang to the Nuba Juevana, Gang to a Nuba and a Puna Digres, the Mena Mapina, Jig in Jimmy. Chixia di Pugo, Samade, Sosugi, that Joya, the Sosun, Puna Digri, Stamna, and it read as some big dog, let them watch Ragi, Nubarchuk, Yamna Mene, then you go the some Jungrua, Tata some Jungrua. That in Agi Giglia, that is Pugus, Council Yamabine, Chigi, Sonam Say, Laman Puna, Sonam Sagor, Misha, you are the Chiendo, the Kumara, just capture Kuma, Puna Digri Lamna. And it because Carson was not did Kumaya Yamaro, didn't Tata Shema Sambiki, Dia Chetu Joada. The Dia Chemato and other Kumaja prison digression Kumajam, Puga Jevena, and Yawa Chemato, all the Lamal Puya, Soso Mena, Kumash, Pushos, Lamedina Sungus, and Kumajan and Puni digression, Kumaja Puvena, Dine, and it Digi, and the Diba Sagorella, Kumajan, the Diba Sagorella, and the Digi Gawad. Yagiro Chabla, Negi, and Diva Chagorova, Diva Sagor, and Digi, Nevo, Jevodia, and Sosuke, Dunga, and Negi, Navale, Yangayo, Jeza Dineza, Dus my Shetan Rapa to Chikmale, and board, choosing the Lamala Chiva Pugora, Tachik Pugore, that Sosolia, Chikuba, and Sosuki, Nubia, Gamonjo, Punity, Nuba Macho, but in Jimmy to Goya Marta, Tinigi, Nuba Chukochi, the Pina degree, says Marche. Jiglia, and also Lama Pin Bear, Chick Sunam Shusawa, Delis, Sunam Cheva, Lama Pure, so Mena, Dua Paji, Bulen Sheda, Antiwachi, and Kumara, Captain Pina, Digiva Lamna, the Nisha and the Awashia Marva, Send the Ewa Chetu, the Ewa Cheturua, Send the Dusine, and the Nigi, the Membi, that sick Bejet Yungurua, the Nijine, Ewa Chemato Vena, and Lamiga Gang Shishi, Chesha Vena. Jelian, Jora again, Yachimbu.
So if one doesn't use one's own intelligence, one is liable to make mistakes. And again, using one's own intelligence has the meaning here of thinking for yourself, investigating, analyzing. So, for example, if one hears a presentation on how to develop bodhicitta, and you're told you only need to meditate on compassion and love, and then bodhicitta arises, you will never generate bodhicitta based on such a teaching, because it is flawed. But for beginners, it is difficult for them to have this quality, this characteristic of a student well developed or developed to a high capacity, because they lack knowledge to base their analysis on. Now, another illustration, if someone comes to teachings on relying on a teacher, and in that presentation will be about the great importance of relying on a teacher, including making offerings to the teacher, and the tremendous merit one creates by offering with a mind of sincere faith or trust in one's teacher. Then, for a new student who's hearing something like this, they may well misunderstand the context and the subtlety of their teaching, thinking that this sounds like they are being deceived, and they may, and as someone's just really trying to get their money. But in this way, then, they can end up generating a strongly negative view because of having a lack of a basis of knowledge for their analysis. So it's important that we develop knowledge and we use our intelligence, thinking for ourselves, investigating, coming to see what's correct. Moreover, we can only proceed in accordance with our own capacity, where this is clear on differing levels. In terms of how we rely on a teacher, this is dependent on our capacity to rely on a teacher. How we, in terms of making offerings, this also is dependent on one's capacity. And in terms of our ability to be able to use intelligence to analyze and investigate, this too is dependent on our capacity, in particular, the amount of knowledge that we have gathered on this topic or not.
야보레 직 노르르다 직 되니기 강아용 디 노르르샤 디 강아 디디 강아 체서 삼비기 디 따따레면 삼베 삼로여나 제하고서나 디 초스 주고 말와 되네 진 초스 말로는 노르시고 말와 되니기 다 뭐나 오다 강아시시 레슨 디셰바디 데레슨 제샤바네 되니 제리아 강아 체디 용고 바자 안 되니기 고시 야와 체시베 고구리에서지 제산 뇌들 로 투면나 뇌도 미루베 데니 고베 로다 덴바시고서 데니 고베 로다 덴바시고서 세도지다 데니시르 야고시아당 야고메바시바 니디 하고야기 야와 넘버 야와 체투겐기 다로 남주 셰랍지 고구리 로다 덴바 셰랍시도다 남주기 셰랍지 고구리 해서 로세아데 대신한테 제외나라 순네 로데 되냐로 로데 로세아와 지나 로데 템바고서 어서 로데 템바세 로데다 되냐 레니 넘버 7 셰랍티스 그렇듯이 고그레스.
So therefore it's important to gather knowledge and use one's intelligence throughout, thinking for oneself, analyzing, investigating, because one may well come across teachings which do have mistakes, and if one just blindly accepts what one is told to do, one may well either make a mistake in one's practice, for example, not being able to develop bodhicitta correctly, or a mistake the mistake may be quite grave and direct one to engage in something that's non-virtuous. So this may well happen if one does not use one's intelligence. And therefore, this paragraph concludes with the sentence, therefore, you need to have the intelligence that understands those two. In other words, that is able to differentiate correct explanations and flawed explanations.
Onda denigi sheba nasu da de shegen di su shigorasene kisinga de lama tsini juda de lama digi shigirase digi shigorma da de lama yago ina shigmarwa de no shigmarwa tsini juda de ma da denigi memba da nga jida aji yorwa da jida 시간 망고 연구로와 진짜 디자인은 어디디 진짜 남사 레년 나바 쳔마도 바네 아니 수시에베네 디젤 바 초소 친제 안디 소수기 노드 경라에 냐가 요레서 월다디 마들 지게 라마 생유주된 덴바디기 데네시 노드 셰바이나 세디 시고 말에 디한 라마 냠렘 바데 야보다 미싱게 이베네 두고도 시시 말와 다 데네게 노드 셰겐디게 마싱한디기 시기로 하다 마싱하다 야 지게 데네기 소소야 지게 아까 소리 마싱 바체 안디가라 안디가 저기 가소리 담년다다 안디지 뒤엔라 차베게 차고여 바다 데니지여 바나 아니 데수기다 고르다야기 냥아 요르바다 데네자도 고걸 마수바스 고인자 데네 담보코런 두시데 가네시드 데타타 차기도 민데세 야와 체투바스 고구리 사지 제거로와 맨해가 저기다 지금 소수기 지 고아당한 망불이고로 와다 지고 제가 지게 신고여 지지에서데 마 고아당 지게 지게 망불이고로 지도나라 디네산 지게 디네털이야 지게 레니 담보 코로나야 직도시 레니 남바체 두개 셔럽지 고고 이어바지 고를 마도 대가래 시시 년샤베나 소수기 삼노기네 예와 기네 마치선 강한 시시 년 바이나 되네 노조 차야기 냥아 요래서 그러와 대 약보에 차야 용으로 와 되네 강시야 약보 지테나네 약보 차로 그러와 양지기 되네 시엔 로고 노조 시엔 지테 디 강시년 바데 노조 용친 버려 쳐로 봐 제가 되네 자디 이 되네게 로순이 뱉네 곧 가와도 하고요 말하면
Just before I come to what Geshe said now, maybe in this paragraph the translation can be changed a little bit in the second sentence. If someone does not have the intelligence to differentiate good explanations from faulty explanations, or rather correct explanations from faulty explanations, that's better. The Tibetan doesn't say way of explaining. It is really, as with Geshe's commentary, and this word good can be translated in many different ways. So correct explanations from faulty explanations. That's better rather than the way of explaining. And now to come to what Geshe just said. So the second quality can tie in with the first, in that if one is biased or partial, one's mind is closed, and therefore one will not be using one's intelligence, and one can even criticize correct explanations, or just not listen to them, because one is distracted by one's attachment, looking for faults. So therefore, bias can aid the lack of intelligence, the lack of the usage of intelligence. Moreover, it's also important here to emphasize the need to develop as much education as possible, so as to be able to, for oneself, to distinguish between a genuine teacher and someone who is not a genuine teacher. A genuine teacher will never deceive their students. The only time a teacher will give a flawed presentation, a presentation with faults in it, would either be because they are not thoroughly educated, at least not in that topic, they are not thoroughly educated despite teaching it, or if they are not a genuine teacher, but rather the afflictions such as attachment dominate them. For example, teachers who long for a great reputation, praise from others, or to receive material benefits or other benefits. So such a teacher with a flawed motivation, or a teacher whose education is not thorough in the topic that, at least in the topic that they're teaching, they could well, intentionally or unintentionally, give a mistaken teaching. A genuine teacher would never do that. A genuine teacher would be clear in what they do not know. And a genuine teacher would only present what they are certain of. So therefore, because there are many people who teach, who have flawed personalities, who aren't genuine teachers and are charismatic. It is always a possibility that if one lacks education, or one's education is not as good as one thinks it is, that one may end up being deceived, end up believing a faulty presentation. And in particular then, this could lead one down paths of non-virtue. So therefore, it's important to gather as much knowledge as possible.
Sumudwa, then Chiki Ma, Geshe Lama, Tibetan, Chiki, Ma, and then Susuki me, or Chitavach, Gushepchene, and the word in Chik, Jomo Tangores, Jiwafa, Juatide, Gushepche. The Yang and the Gushepche or Gushepche, the Gushepche with Hone, and they are Juatangores. She Juatan did in a man, and the Minimative Lendi, Dr. Chaduminu, Dine, Chedi, and in his church ending, I sing you said to do shaking the year, then sing you made that Dushin how to resident Juatan Gores, Juatan, Dine, Pagin, Juatan, then Jig, and Jiggy, Delia, Juatan, Dichimasun. Di na di be chawata chagure chagumares and dusin java chores tene haures sumdo yarmje.
His Holiness himself gives the advice that one should ask respectfully ask questions ask questions to the teacher, because through their answers one can identify how well they know the topic or not. So this, His Holiness was specifically saying that one should debate, presenting consequences and pervasions to gain clarity as to whether the teacher actually is qualified in the particular topic that they are teaching.
And by Lenny, number 2 to be get and didn't shut up that then, but you know, and Diggy Bellana, there did some music my answer. Chogam Yamna, Deni Yuja, Remu Chuen, Tarasona, Nudu Murue, Dunya Chamber than 10 Quos.
Then continuing, are those two sufficient, even if one has both impartiality and intelligence? Someone who is just like one of those listening to the Dharma in a lifeless painting is not a suitable vessel. Therefore, you also need to have strong interest.
And the remote chain and batters and remote here, tell the church, the remote get up in the mirror, in the Colocazation, Koya Yudraska Marwa, Kokas and some Koran, then go Marta Marwa. She's a remote chain by remote Yambatter, did go chain Yangu Bene, Tambo Yubache, and the Rosurunia Bachina, and Chosumalongache, and the Nigel number Shivachi, Chu, Dunyer, Dumba, remember, and the got. Chu Marwa, then Shubine, cause Delia some tango Marwa, Matamaza, Yagi to Marwa, or Shin new to Miruachin, Yagi to Mar new to Miruve, Dineza, and Dunya Chimpoda, then goes over, said the Chelia, Shuegi, Yamlin Chegi, Dushiagi, Tating age Jango, the Shingo Sempiki, Yamlin Chosum, Dunya Dumba, Chimpo Tempach Kuri, says, she's not that Sunny Dunya was Kishusum that did it.
Yeah, Lama Tsongkhapa is saying, having these two characteristics of impartiality and intelligence, they on their own are insufficient. Merely being impartial and intelligent, one may end up like a character in a painting. So a character in a painting is not someone who's thinking for themselves. They're not someone who's engaging at all. So therefore, we need strong interest or strong enthusiasm Without strong enthusiasm, even though we may be impartial and intelligent, so open-minded, and be able to think for ourselves, if we do not have strong enthusiasm, we will not improve.
Lo suru ne bache an le ni number che de share up den bache an che de nyam ne che de ni dumba yoba se de ni dumba yoba chin sum sum ro da sum gure sa da digal ya jawa na la kar sum se ne an che dan che ma wa la gu ba se de che dan che ma wa le ya gu jap che ba de gu ba de ko gure se chi gu de ba dan gu ba si de ne yi de ba se de le ya ji ni 자와 이치기 대바된 보여가지고 그래서 이 뛰어봤어요. 진짜 되네기 있는 바에다 계셔가 나 자로 그래서 제가 디간에 두시네 고글에 생각다 된 발고서 오세 되네가 제 계셔가 되어 숨도 오세요다 나다데 네 인규를 배지 그리지 우마진예 내가 거리 저와나 비지 뭐다지 자위 저와 베드리기 저와 면도지.
The text continues. Chandrakirti's commentary to that would be to the ornament of Mahayana Sutras states an additional two characteristics for the student. The first additional being respect for the Dharma and the expounder of the Dharma, and secondly, an attentive mind. So these are two additional qualities to make it 5 in total.
Dinigi da kishu sumda lumigi kishu sumda kishu nga roshi da dondala nga jugi chue nyamlen che bala samlo tanhangi samlo dinigi kugure chue shuigi loma tigelia samlo dinigi kugure sede chi jangbo che ane lama chue shusil la rangchola nchaba de janchola tangwa me bachi lo suru ne bachi dene lenyi gi chigi pa chi sheba delia ane namju yawa che tu bache dene ge chue de nyamlen che ge dönyi ge dumba chi yoba kugure dene yago chi yoba na de lama loma de dene ge kejo sangwa che ne lama de kisin sheba ne lama delia singi kejo juda den bege singi juda de lama dene shi da nyamdo da loma da lama niga dönyi shi tu songba na ba dene je ge nyamlen che ge jimba de ge pa chi o kompedo yargi yane yargi du ba dene ge dene za dene shi kugure sa sungor ba.
Here we see then two presentations or two presentations of qualities for the students to develop. There's 3 with it now with an additional 2. So the initial 3 were being impartial, intelligent, and enthusiastic. Now we also have added that one should be respectful towards the teacher and the teaching, as well as be fully attentive or fully focused on the teaching. If one has these qualities, it will enable one, or to the extent that one has these qualities, it will enable one to engage effectively in one's relationship with the teacher and the teachings. And moreover, if, as we saw in the previous section, the Lama has those 10 characteristics and therefore is a fully qualified Mahayana teacher, then this is an excellent foundation for one's spiritual development.
Denegi duwe mido samdaya da denegi yoba ina jeso ira che komya da denegi meba ina denegi yoya ge tabshi che komya odu sina anzu du sina samdana deneshi samdang gures jina denegi samla de yang anzu yane yang du sina samdaya da du sina samdaba ina denegi samla de ne ya nibo konde pya da denegi pya le dene da jikan sunyam lengi rimba de jike gyogar yargi rotu gora deneza anzu ge nyamne rimba samna tana rimba dus kugure saje lo chaya ge 로딜이야 가지다 삼로 야도기 예와 체제네 다 누가 되게 매봐서 그래서 삼 누가 될 때네 맞아 동아야 규인자 디바베 베네 초롱게 녀모바 차당 원도 선비 삼로디 다디 두가레스 제산디 여바는 아주 제부 동아야 하지마다 용 말레스 제산디 바까고레스 다디 독초라는 가르고스네 초롱 매바로 정부시 삼당고레스 디 여바는 초롱 용 말레스 디 독초 년보 고미야디 정부 삼다이디 디네 초롱 로디 년보 책으로 가야 디 책으로 디 삼당고레스 디야 파티고 고레스 하자 내게 아직 레게 남아 미 강한 시제들 지기 최시기도 지 가르 시제들 고 다가라래 줘봐나 니 아니 로드 노트 차고 될때네 소소 용어라야만 고용그래 직진에 약보요 직진에 용어치 뭐라 냐가 요래서 주라 되네서 디 약보시 다다래도 민도 제바체네 거 예와체 예체도 고그래서 제산디 예와 마셔바제 고 초진에 레선배 섬는 디 다다체 노트래 디 삼는 가서 먹어야 돼 저다 야와 체제 제바체 곧 파제바체지 임바당 인되나 된바도 노트 매바도 가리 하고체 매 하고네 되니 딱딱 임바디 하 지스루와 어디 하고 가지고 그래서 딜로된 냠는 지가 지레스 아야직 되니 여반에 되니 매바 레로 안지기 제 매바이나 딜레로다 제디 매바 레로레스다 디 아즈리 개와이 뭐 공부도 돼야다 동아시아 디기 두비알라 dunga chigi nugores di lelo le dela tene chigi ngazulia kyongra gores tene za delia dönye dumba pe chikashin toyo kone nyamlen chi dönye dumba gores di dumba dinga zo yane yando ya samda mo kompet tang gores di yobane lelo de meba cha cheza dönye dumba de shukaze chewe wena di zamnya ngazo lobjon chiya yoga chetu goze yoga chetu bine anya yarge yoga dugowa dineza desu samna de yangazo goya dire dudushine samtang lobjon chihen china anche nyamlen chihen dela samno dine sitang gogores dine yangazo geda nyama mebaina ade yobege ngazo tab시che 안지게 오스여베네 야게다 야고에는 딜레 야게다 두신 지고래서 또 나닝보딩 아주 두신데 삼다나디 두스당 고래서지 당한적이 두송으로 와대
The purpose of the Buddha Dharma is to enable us to transform our minds, and that is the very meaning of practicing. It means training our minds. So here, these qualities are about us recognizing these qualities, either that we have and thereby rejoicing, or those that we need to recognize, those that we need to develop, and then applying ourselves to develop those. And thirdly, also to be aware of the arisal, the temporary arisal of any of these faults, and immediately eliminate them. For example, the arisal of bias or a lack of enthusiasm. Because these qualities, the purpose of these qualities being listed is so that we can make ourselves suitable vessels, someone who is suitable to make the most of the teaching opportunity, of the opportunity of this very life. So therefore, we are encouraged here to be aware of these qualities, develop those that are lacking, rejoice in those that are strong, but also to be aware of the occasional arisal of any of these qualities, and not just take them for granted that this is something that we have done and we don't need to think about, but rather to be mindful and watch out for the arisal of bias or a not thinking or a lack of enthusiasm. So to review these three qualities, that of intelligence is really of great importance. One needs to think for oneself, analyze, think for oneself. There is the purpose of, there is the benefit of ensuring that one doesn't follow faulty advice or have mistakes in one's practice. But moreover, with all the steps, the vast majority of the steps of meditation, they require analysis, thinking, investigating, analyzing. We should be doing that in our meditation. We should be doing that whilst we read text and receive teachings. Moreover, or furthermore rather, the quality of being impartial, This we need to watch out for. Because a biased mind is a closed mind. And we need to have our mind open towards all that we interact with. A mind that is closed is a mind where we are following our attachment towards what we are biased towards, what we like. So one may well have bias towards one's own teacher, one's own tradition. This we need to let go of, not see that as being okay because it's on the right side. That we need to let go of, and rather be impartial and use our intelligence to ensure that our mind is open. And then thirdly, enthusiasm is also indispensable. And again, the English word interest is too soft. It's usually translated as zeal, so it's a very strong word. Without enthusiasm, we may be listening and thinking for ourselves, and we may have our mind open, so unbiased, and we may be thinking for ourselves, so using our intelligence. But if we are not enthusiastic, laziness will overcome us. We'll easily be distracted. We'll not really want to bring our mind back. We'll struggle to apply what we are hearing to our mind, and we'll struggle to apply it to our mind throughout the day. So therefore, all three of these qualities, we need to rejoice in what we have, cultivate what is still a little weak, and always be mindful to be sure that these faults don't arise, but we remain guided by these three qualities. And in this way, our spiritual development will be greatly aided. So thank you. Then we can conclude there for tonight. But if you have questions, then do feel free to ask. Then tomorrow. Thank you.